Last month, Apple did something they've never done before. They released two brand new Apple Watch models, the Series 6 and the budget-oriented SE model. This review is going to be focused on the Apple Watch SE and my experience and thoughts on it after having it here in the office for 2 weeks. But instead of this being the same old review you see on every other channel, I want to mix things up and take a unique look at the Apple Watch SE from Apple's perspective in terms of their marketing master plan and why they decided to release this model alongside the Series 6. If you're in Apple's shoes, your ultimate goal is to sell as many Apple Watches as possible. And the best way to do that is try to make a trend that catches on. That's why the overall design of the Apple Watch hasn't really changed in the last 6 years, ever since Tim Cook said, "One more thing," and introduced the very first Apple Watch at their September event in 2014. Apple's ultimate goal was to make the Apple Watch a symbol of their brand, just like they did with the original AirPods, which basically went viral, and that's why the design hasn't really changed on the Apple Watch. And Apple succeeded, with the Apple Watch becoming not only the best-selling smartwatch in the world, but also the best-selling watch, period, in the world. You can basically see people wearing Apple Watches everywhere, and while that's great for Apple, it does create a problem. When most people buy an Apple Watch, they keep it for years, most likely at least 3, 4, or maybe even 5 years. We made a few Apple Watch videos last week, and I was surprised by the amount of people who said they still have their original Apple Watch or even the Series 2. So the problem that this creates for Apple is market saturation. This basically means that no matter how good your brand new Apple Watch is, if everyone already owns one, there's no one left to sell it to. Sales will ultimately go down unless you can figure out a way to either get people to upgrade to a new one or find a completely new market of people who are willing to buy one. And I'm here to tell you that Apple has figured it out. But before I tell you how, let's get into the second major issue for Apple, and that's feature saturation. When Apple released their Series 5 watch last year, they immediately discontinued the Series 4. They did that because it was almost the same exact watch. In fact, there were only 3 changes: the always-on display, 32 gigs of storage instead of 16, and the compass feature. That's it. And even last month, they revealed the Series 6 while immediately discontinuing the Series 5 for the exact same reason. This time, there are only 6 changes: the red and blue finishes, the always-on altimeter, the blood oxygen sensor, the brighter always-on display while in direct sunlight, the faster processor, and the ultra-wideband chip. Now, while there are more changes than before, a lot of those things don't really matter to someone who already has the Series 5, and that's why my brother Max is returning the Apple Watch Series 6. That's also why I'm not buying it for my wife. She already has the Series 4, and she says she's completely happy with it, and it does everything she wants it to do. That's called feature saturation, when your Apple Watch is so feature-rich already that it's very hard to think of groundbreaking new features that'll make people want to upgrade to the latest model. So from Apple's point of view, this is a problem, especially if they want to continue selling Apple Watches for the next 5 to 10 years, which their investors are counting on. So I'm here to tell you that Apple has figured it out, and it all starts with the name, the Apple Watch SE. Back in April of this year, Apple released the brand new iPhone SE, and they had 3 main goals for that iPhone, at least in my opinion. Goal number 1 was to make it affordable for other countries like China and India, where the bulk of the smartphone market share goes to lower priced phones. And at $399 for an iPhone with the latest chip, it's definitely a great value. Goal number 2 was to get people who are still using older iPhones like the iPhone 5, the iPhone 6, and the iPhone 7 to upgrade. $400 for a brand new iPhone with the latest chip, a brand new battery, and a familiar design is definitely enough to get non-techie users to upgrade. And it even attracted a bunch of Android users as well. Which brings us into goal number 3. Make an affordable smartphone that's a great choice for parents to buy for their kids. mainly young teenagers. $399 is very reasonable for an iPhone, but here's the secret that most people don't think about. If you're a teen and the first phone you own is an iPhone, you're much more likely to upgrade to another iPhone in the future, since you've now become comfortable with the operating system. And there you go. Apple has another lifetime Apple customer that's much more likely to buy Apple devices and pay for Apple services. And that finally brings us to the Apple Watch SE. It's basically got almost all the same features as the Series 6, but it's only $279. So this is what can finally get those people who still own an older Apple Watch to upgrade. But that's not even the biggest deal. Out of all of the new features Apple released this year for the Apple Watch, the absolute most important feature is the new family setup feature. Now, you can set up an Apple Watch for someone who doesn't have an iPhone. This means someone with an Android phone can now use an Apple Watch. An elderly person with health issues can now use an Apple Watch without an iPhone. And most importantly, a child can now have an Apple Watch without an iPhone. Now, if you think that's crazy, it actually makes a whole lot of sense compared to buying a smartphone for your child. Compared to even the cheapest iPhone, the iPhone SE for $399, you can get the Apple Watch SE with LTE for $329, which is the model you want for family setup. On top of that, cellular service for wearables is significantly cheaper than getting another smartphone line. For example, T-Mobile charges $28 per line for the absolute cheapest plan, and that's if you have a total of 4 lines. But to add a wearables device, it's literally only $10 a month per device. So you're saving money on every front by going with an Apple Watch instead of an iPhone. So for a child ranging from ages 8 to around 13 or maybe even 15, an Apple Watch makes sense because you don't have to worry about them dropping and cracking their iPhone, or even worse, losing it. It's always on their wrist so you can track their location at any time. You can text them or call them no matter where they are, and you don't have to worry about them browsing the web on sites they shouldn't be looking at, or maybe even worse, using TikTok. You can manage who they're able to communicate with, and you can even send cash directly to their Apple Watch, which they can spend at any place that supports Apple Pay. It's basically the perfect solution for keeping in touch with children that aren't old enough or responsible enough to have their own smartphone. And I personally think that buying Apple Watches for kids is gonna become a trend within 1 to 2 years. If you think about it, when everything goes back to normal and kids start going back to class, every single kid in the classroom will notice the Apple Watch on that one kid's wrist. And that kid is gonna show off his new Memoji watch face that looks exactly like him. And just like what happened with the AirPods, every single kid in the classroom is gonna want an Apple Watch. And there is one thing I know for sure. That child Apple Watch user is almost guaranteed to become an Apple Watch user in the future, which means they're also likely to become an iPhone user as well. So to wrap all of this up, if you're in Apple's shoes and the Apple Watch has just about reached peak levels of market saturation and feature saturation, what do? You spark a new trend of Apple Watches for kids, and you secure the future generation of users who will eventually be much more likely to buy Apple products and services when they grow up. And that is Apple's master plan for the Apple Watch SE. And here's a little bit of proof that Apple is quite literally planning this. Why do you think they released the Solo Loop bands that you simply stretch onto your wrist? Because it's meant to be easier for kids, as well as the elderly. Oh, and by the way, I forgot to share my experience with the Apple Watch SE. It's basically been great. And if you don't care about the always-on display or the added health features, just buy the SE, especially if you want to get an LTE model, since you'll save $170 compared to the Series 6. And there you guys have it. Hopefully you enjoyed my marketing focused review of the Apple Watch SE. And if you did, go ahead and click the circle to subscribe for more videos like this one, and consider checking out our Apple product merch like this t-shirt right over there, and watch that video, whatever it is, up there. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.